Welcome back, everybody. Here with Andy to talk about Pistons, free agency, our impressions from the signings. We'll get into a little bit of Summer League here in the beginning. But first, before we get started, Andy, let everybody know where they can find you online.
You can find me on Twitter at D_D_Pistons_fan. It's been a very interesting free agency.
I listened back to our free agency primer. I'm like, man, none of this applies. Like, we just talked about everything we talked about didn't really matter. Nikhil Alexander Walker kind of mattered, but like Miles Turner wasn't an issue thing. Santi Aldama didn't materialize. I mentioned Duncan like 10 seconds for 10 seconds. It's never anything really considered seriously. So it's just always funny to me when I think for most teams and most people that do like team specific podcasts, that ends up happening where you get like a wish list of guys you want and talk about this, and then it ends up being like, no, that didn't happen unless there's rumors out there and like people have stated things already. It's always funny to hear that. Before we dive into the actual moves that the Pistons did make, they are playing summer league games. We're recording this on July 14th, 2025. The Pistons have played two summer league games in Las Vegas. Just give your general impression so far, whether it's players, the team, or whatever. We'll return when summer league ends for a full review like we did last year. But what's your impressions, Andy, on this summer league team so far in 2025?
Well, my first impression is Dennis Jenkins is making me look really bad from what I said about him on like the last podcast. Like he's been really good. Like good enough that I wouldn't be surprised if the Pistons gave him a roster spot. And part of me even wonders if, and I was going to ask you about this, if that's just a good idea to reward someone who's honestly put in the work so that future people who are players can look at your G League and be like, yeah, like you put in the work, you get rewarded. They'll move you up. And just because it's obvious he has put in the work last year and then this year, and of course it is summer league. You don't want to overreact to it, but last summer league he did the same thing where we were like, wow, like he looks solid. And so that would be my biggest takeaway. Looking at Ron Holland, his shooting has been good. I hope the Pistons don't shut down any of their summer league players. I hope they try to win the summer league. I hope they keep them playing because guys can get hurt at any time. It happens, unfortunately, but let these guys play. I think it's a big difference if we see him shoot well over all 4 games from 3 point versus he just had one good game and then they shut him down. And then Bobby Clinton, he has looked okay. I think there's areas where you see like I don't think he could. You question where he'll fit in the NBA, but I think, and everyone disagrees with me already as far as the hole we have at the backup power forward. I think we are fine with Asar and Ron playing backup 4 minutes, and then Bobby Clinton sprinkle him in here and there just for development purposes, see what he can do. Um, Chaz Lanier, he's everything I thought he would be as far as he can shoot the ball. Everything else needs a little bit of work. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't see the court much at all this year, but he just learns the NBA game is around the players, around the team, and he just develops. But we have enough depth that second round picks honestly shouldn't be getting into the rotation unless they explode or there's some sort of injury.
I don't agree with that thinking only because the guy that went at number 39, 2 picks after Bobby Clinton last year was Jalen Wells, who ended up starting for Memphis and is probably their long-term solution at shooting guard. Like Malcolm Brogdon went pretty much in similar, range. Jalen Brunson went there. I think good teams with good scouting departments find people that can contribute right away and can contribute for a very long time. But my hot take with Bobby and Chaz is I think Chaz is way more ready than Bobby is, mainly just because of like athletic and mentality. If Bobby Clinton would just let it fly the way Chaz does from three, I think that would be more of an argument. And Bobby Clemens still like the thing that really made him like oof to a lot of guys in the draft space last year. Like you barely ever see him dunk, man. it takes like a lot of build up for him to do it. I laughed at that Houston game when he got that alley oop because there wasn't really an alley oop. I think it was Ron that threw it to him, and his fingertips got it and dipped it in. It was like, yep, I'm glad he got one alley oop, but I don't think that's going to be put in the playbook anytime soon. So I always think any great team finds guys in that 31 to like 45 range that can contribute and contribute right away. I mean, it just takes the team that finds the specific skill set. And for Chaz, I'm like, yeah, throw him out there. They need another shooter for one thing. They brought in a Duncan who's a good shooter, Caris up and down shooter. They need to replace Tim Hardaway shooting. They need to replace Malik Beasley shooting. Obviously, that's a tall task, and you don't expect a rookie to do that. But again, he has the confidence and the ability to do it, Chaz Lanier. Your other point of like Dennis Jenkins, yeah, they need a point guard. I mean, sure, Sasser's still kicking around there. They say they're going to play Caris at point guard. Ivy's supposed to be like second unit point guard. But I mean, if they need a real, actual dude that's played the position, knows how to set him up, can guard other point guards, then yes, absolutely sign Dennis Jenkins. And your other point of like just to do it to show agents that like will reward. I think they've already done that though, because looking at this summer league roster, there's a guy by the name of John Ukumaru. You know who John Ukumaru is, Andy?
I do not.
Do you not watch your local news there in Michigan? Come on now. John Okumato is the only guy to make the Motor City Cruise from the open tryouts that they have every single year. He played, I believe, at Eastern Kentucky in college. He's 6'7", 195, 200. He was in the slam dunk contest for the G League last year. That's how athletic he is. And he made it to the summer league team because of his athleticism, his size, and his work ethic. That's another great story to send to the rest of the league of like, put in the time, or we're going to invest in you and bring you here along other dudes that like came back from overseas, high profile undrafted free agents. And my goodness, the difference a year makes. You remember the roster we were looking at last year, Andy? I again, when I was listening to our last summer's summer league preview, some of those names, I was like, oh my gosh. And no disrespect to those guys. But again, they weren't on anybody's draft boards. No ceilings NBA.com didn't have them. Sam Vecini didn't have them. I mean, these are real deep scouts that go like 100 to 200 deep. And, they're calling up people that nobody else is calling. This season, though, we got Sky Ziegler, like we said before, Tennessee, 5-year guy. Bryce Williams, fantastic wing shooter from Nebraska. John Okumato, like I said already. Toulouse Smith came back. TJ Matlock, who's a good gamble. Every team should have a gamble like that. Alabama State scoring guard. Chaz Lanier, our pick. Miller Kopp, who's a stretch four from Indiana. Good shooter. Bobby Klintman came back. Trevor Keels, shout out Trevor Keels, who I believe was a second-round pick. I forget who picked him. 6'5", 221, coming out of Duke last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago. I remember a lot of people went to bat for Trevor Keels as a first-round pick of like, hey, he's the next like Duke, role player guy that maybe didn't get a lot of shine, but definitely has the NBA body. 3-point shots coming along. Dennis Jenkins came back. Ron Holland, of course. And then Dawson Garcia, great stretch big, who had a lifelong career at North Carolina and then at Minnesota. Sincere Carey, who was at Kent State, another like scoring guard. He was a leader in points in NCAA, like definitely a microwave guy. Smaller, 6'1", 185. Garrison Brooks, another UNC guy who I believe it was a year or two ago, came out after 5 years at NCAA, played most of his time at UNC in North Carolina, and then last season at Mississippi State. And then last but not least, TJ Bickerstaff. That last name sounds familiar. It's JB's nephew. I don't know what it is about these Bickerstaffs. Can't they just like settle on one name? Why do they got to have the initials? JB, TJ. And even then, like, that's the one where I'm sure like people like nepotism, blah, blah, blah. I mean, like TJ was the leading scorer on his team. He's like 6'9", 207, undersized center type of dude. Hustle rebounder. Like those guys. I mean, last year there was even Enrique Freeman. Like TJ profiles the same as the Enrique Freeman type of guy, where in college he's a center, but he's really wing size, but he really rebounds the ball better than just about anybody. So that whole roster this year is like, okay, like Garrison Brooks, Dawson Garcia, like pedigree, played a long time. Bryce Williams was leading scorer for an upstart Nebraska team, played under Fred Hoiberg there. So like an NBA system, and then Zakai comes in along with Chaz. Like it's like, okay, it's clear now that agencies are picking up the phone. And Dawson, Bryce, and TJ Matlock, Sakai, like they signed immediately. They were super fast. They were some of the first names out there. And that's another big improvement from last year where I think it took us like a couple days before Summer League even started. And we're like, we didn't even know if they're getting undrafted free agents. So kudos to Trajan and his staff and, getting the word out there. And both Danis and Toulouse, I think, are already great success stories of how this front office has used the Motor City Cruise. Not only did they keep them there all season, not only did they keep them on the two-way so they got some time with the big club, but they were some of the best guys in the G League. And now you see them in Summer League and you're like, they look like they're ahead of the pack. And you can see the chemistry they have there. So even if they don't sign with the Pistons, like they've already put their name out there and people know like, hey, these guys like produce.
Isn't it crazy the difference a year can make? I mean, such a big change. And you can see it in their two games that they've won. Like this is a good team. I know it's summer league basketball, but still, when you look at what we have out there, it's like nice.
Yeah, you remember Ron Holland was picked even though like his agency wouldn't send him to work out for Detroit. The agents are picking up the phone now. So thank God. But we are here to talk about free agency again. We'll return to Summer League after it's over. Unfortunately, with free agency, we have to start with the Malik Beasley situation. Malik Beasley is being investigated by the feds for potential betting on games in which he helped determine the outcome. What did you hear about the Malik Beasley? Like, oh, he's being investigated. They're not bringing him back. And what are your thoughts on this?
Just saw a tweet, and at first I was like, "Oh, you're kidding me! Like this can't be real." And then when I started to think about it, it made some sense in terms of like a couple of days earlier was when we had heard that the Pistons were interested in Nikhil, and that never made sense to me. But if they weren't going to be signing Malik Beasley, then pivoting in that direction made a lot of sense to me in terms of going after him. I know some people are like, yeah, but we could have got both of them, maybe. Um, as it turns out, with Atlanta and their trade exception that they had, it was much easier for them to go after him and get him. But the Malik Beasley news, and we still don't know how it was going to play out. At first, I thought there was a hope that we'd be able to sign him to a minimum contract and just keep him on the roster in case everything blows over. But it looks like the Pistons have moved on and that ship has sailed.
Yeah. I had a flashback when I don't know if I saw it on, Blue Sky or Instagram. The minute I saw it, yeah, I don't have insider knowledge or anything, but I'd heard from somebody that I know in February that lives in Michigan, in, around Detroit area. They're like, hey, I know somebody who lives in his building and they say he hasn't paid his rent in like 6 months. And me and a couple other people I know were like, oof, we hope that's just a rumor. But Malik Beasley hasn't exactly been like a paragon of virtue. You got the unfortunate, pulling a gun on people that pulled up on his property. I think when he's in Minnesota, like he's had the Larissa Pippen, like, bro, what are you doing dating your teammate's mom? There have been some things that he's done that are questionable. And it's part of what we talked about with him last season of like, this guy's never really caught on because of some of these kind of things and character off the court stuff. So at the minute I heard he's being investigated for that, I was like, okay, unfortunately, it makes sense now. And that obviously was a rumor. And then all that other stuff came out. Like it was $27,000 to a freaking barber. Like his dentist is garnishing his paychecks. It's just like, man, and it's so close, right? So close to getting that deal. I don't want to be callous because I feel for Malik Beasley. Like if this really is a gambling addiction kind of thing, like man, you got to get help. All I can think of is like, man, do you have any friends, like anybody that could have stepped in and talked to you, or just been like, man, you shouldn't be doing this. But again, when I said I don't want to be callous, I'm like, man, can you imagine if they signed that deal and then like 2 days later it came out? That would have been catastrophic. I've seen just people back and forth too of like, how could the Pistons not know? Like, did they know before? They say they only knew a couple days. I mean, that's just speculation. I don't think anybody can really know. And in situations like this, if it is addiction, like speaking as somebody who has dealt with alcohol addiction, like when you're an addict, you do a good job of hiding things from everybody, even like the closest people you know. So it's tough to know. It just sucks, man. It really sucks because I think everybody in the fan base really embraced Beasley, and Piston fans, the guys we really embrace are the island of misfit toys, right? The guys that nobody else wanted that somehow didn't work out. Like the going to work Pistons. That's why I think so many people like that team over the bad boys. Not that the bad boys, you know, are lesser or anything. It's just like everybody on that going to work team. It's like they weren't the number one overall pick like Zeke. They weren't like the paragon of virtue that is Joe D, right? And again, no offense to those guys, but just the city of Detroit and like I can only speak for myself growing up as a Piston fan. That's part of my appeal is like we're not the Lakers. Nobody wants to go here. Everybody disses on this city and stuff. It's like, no, we'll take these guys, we'll flip you off, and then we'll win a title. So like Malik fit into that mold, and it just sucks, man, that this situation ended up being the case. We don't want to say he's guilty. We live in a country where you are presumed innocent until proven otherwise. So Terry Rozier just got cleared after being investigated. We'll see what happens with Malik Beasley, but man, this sucks.
Yeah. Um, how do you feel the Pistons did pivoting? Do you want to go through the Dennis Schroeder sign and trade? Um, all that stuff that went on with that?
Let's pivot to Caris LeVert. Let's pivot to the actual players. You're obsessed with Schroeder. He's gone, Andy. Don't talk about him anymore. So Caris LeVert was, I think, the first signing that they announced. Right? Have If you're not watching us on YouTube, I have Spotrac and Basketball Reference pulled up because I'll be going back and forth between them. Caris LeVert ended up signing a 2-year deal for 28.9 million. He's making 14.4 million per season, roughly. That's the first signing that they announced. Caris LeVert, if you don't know, 6'6", 205 pounds. Last season at both Cleveland and Atlanta, he scored 12.1 points per game, pulled in 3.2 rebounds per game, had 3.4 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.5 blocks per game, and 1.2 turnovers per game. Shooting splits for Caris LeVert last season on both Atlanta and Cleveland combined, those two, 55.2% from 2-point range, 37.3% from 3-point range, and then 71% from that free throw line. Andy, first and foremost, your impressions of Caris LeVert.
Um, I'm I'm good with the addition because we got someone who could shoot after. If we didn't, I would have had a problem with it. Um, I think it, so he's not a point guard like Schroeder is, but he's gonna help as a secondary ball handler, and I think he'll fill a very good role on this team. And I think JB's experience already working with him tells us he knows exactly how he wants to use him.
Yeah, I kind of wonder how much JB played into this. I think you and I are like just right over the edge of what we think about Karis, where it seems like you're like, I'm 50%, but I lean a little bit more towards it's a good move. Whereas I'm like, same way I feel that way. I'm like, if they didn't sign Duncan, I would have hated him more. But I still feel like this was a bad move and not the way to go. We'll get into more of that towards the end of like what I think is a consistent problem with Pistons GMs and presidents going all the way back to Joe D. But all those numbers like you put out, especially the shooting splits 55.2, 37.3, 71. I mean, you like the free throw numbers to be better, but good splits, a good passer. I spent since free agency and all these announcements, I've just watched all the Caris LeVert tape from last year. And I'm like, I don't hate it. He keeps the ball moving. He seems like he's really good in pick and roll, finding his centers. He's a good enough shooter. I mean, do you believe he's the 40.5% he was shooting in Cleveland, or do you believe he's the 33.8% he was shooting from three in Atlanta? I kind of lean more towards that 33.8% there in Atlanta. But again, it's like if he's replacing Schroeder in like kind of that role of like, we just need a guy in the second unit who can get buckets. I understand that part of it. It's just not the route I would have gone. But the next guy that they did sign ended up being, I don't know what it is. At this rate, Andy, you know who our next trade and free agent acquisitions are going to be?
I do not.
We're going to sign or trade for either Mo Wagner, Jordan Poole, or Franz Wagner, because there's all these U of M guys. And again, speaking as U of M alum, I like my guys, but come on now, this is getting a little bit ridiculous. Duncan Robinson is the other free agent that the Pistons end up signing in a sign and trade where they send Simone Fontecchio over to the Heat. And then Duncan came over to our Pistons here, and he signed for 3 years, 47.9 million, where he's making roughly 15.9 per season. But that contract is funky. Let's see if they actually list it yet on Spotrac. It's basically like the first year he gets it, and then the second year and the third year are non-guaranteed. So it's only 2 million guaranteed for Duncan in that second year of the contract, and then not guaranteed at all in the third year. Very bizarre. I'm going to give away my grade here for the overall offseason. It's a B minus because I'm like, I don't think you can fail it completely. Part of the reason why I give it the minus and the B, like, again, I'm an instructor in college. B minus to me is a grade where I'm like, sure, you passed it. Sure, you're not at a C level, but like, man, you got a lot of work to do. I mean, if they flipped Duncan and Caris's contracts, I think that would have been better. I obviously would have wanted Duncan for 3 years, like on a guarantee deal, just because his skill set, like, it doesn't diminish. I know he's like 31, 32, something like that. But as a shooter like that doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on his body, isn't me asked to be thrown around and stuff, it's like, you're going to be fine. Whereas with Caris, it's like, I mean, secondary ball handler. Again, we'll get into the career up and down numbers too. Like, he's never really been a consistent shooter. I don't really know what his role is. It just seems like that contract can go bad with that player type. Whereas like Duncan, if he doesn't shoot it well, number one, I don't think like anybody feels that's really going to happen, right? And number two, like his contract is a lot easier to move than Caris, who's kicked around the league and was thrown in Atlanta and played, but like didn't really want him there. He was just thrown in to get some draft picks and other things, right? So that's my little spiel on the contracts. I wish Duncan's was more guaranteed and they could get out of Caris's earlier. Also, these 2-year contracts are just bizarre to me. We'll get into that here at the end too, because they did the same thing with Tobias last year, which I think shot them in the foot with this free agency. But again, put a pin in that. Duncan Robinson, 6'7", 215 pounds, shooter. 11 points per game last year with the Heat, 2.3 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 0.5 steals per game, 0.1 blocks per game, 1.2 turnovers per game. Shooting splits for Duncan are 55.6% from 2-point range, 39.3% from 3-point range on 6.5 threes per game, and then 88.7% from the free throw line. Circle back to like 2016, 2018, somewhere in there. I'm at a game with my mom at Michigan in the Chrysler Center. We're watching that team with Caris LeVert and Duncan Robinson warm up. I'm telling her, as my mom played basketball all the way into college, like she's a point guard. This is where I learned pretty much almost all the game from. And we're watching the guys warm up, and I'm telling her like, oh yeah, Caris, and he's probably going to be the next NBA guy after Timmy and Trey Burke, and she's just sitting there watching everybody warm up, and then she's like, who's that tall white guy over there? I'm like, oh, that's Duncan. All he kind of does is shoot threes, and she's like, I actually think he's going to be the better NBA player. And they're like, what are you talking about? And her whole argument was like, he doesn't get in the way, and like he makes everybody else better because all he does is run around off screens, and like you like playing with it as a point guard too. She's like, you like playing with a guy like that because he gets you easy assists and easy points, and he's always like constantly in motion, and it helps out the offense so much. And at the time, I was like, oh, Mom, get out of here. But it was one of those experiences where I'm like, yeah, learn from your elders. And she was obviously right, that and I think even she was like, he's so tall too. It's hard to swat his jumper. So shout out to my mom, the basketball genius in my life anyway. So and it's become true. Maybe he doesn't have the same production as Caris, but there's a reason why he's stuck with the Heat, helped him on a lot of finals runs and stuff. Um, I mean, I think you and I give the Duncan Robinson one an A+ signing. Obviously, Malik's gone. We're not, neither of us are going to argue that Duncan can replace that level of production, but they need a shooter. And Duncan is probably the best pure shooter out available in this free agency class, right?
I would agree with you. Once we lost Malik, I thought Duncan Robinson, we had to get him. I thought it was like non-negotiable. And I like his contract, and I'm actually comfortable with the idea of Caris's contract of just being two years. Um, I really think this is their way of trying to see what they have with the young players still, even though they were successful. Um, we really don't have any minutes with Cade, Ivy, Asar, Tobias, and Duran. So even though we're still keeping the same core, there's still some questions. And I just think rotating the vets around them that can fill a role and then have contracts that are going to be easy to move. I think it was a good offseason, at least for what I wanted as captain of the Run It Back fan club. I'm happy with it.
I'm gonna start this now, and it's gonna be a running theme all off season until I see it happen. I think they need to start Duncan Robinson. I would like for the lineup to be Cade, Duncan, Asar, Tobias, and Duran Stu because they play the most minutes. I think especially Duncan with Asar, like that's a perfect combination. One super athletic, great defender. The other guy's super efficient shooter, always, willing to let it fly from three. Asar can't shoot threes. Duncan doesn't defend very well. Like they just seem like a good combination. Also, you got to think about because one of the questions I ask is like, is Duncan replacing Timmy or is he replacing Beasley? My answer would be he's replacing Timmy. And if that's the case, like Timmy made the starting lineup work. I know we had our beef with him and he wasn't like as efficient. And that's the thing too, is like Duncan's way more efficient than Timmy is. Timmy still ended up being like 56, 57% true shooting, whereas Duncan like averages like 59. I think last year it was 59.5% true shooting percentage. Yeah, 59.5. And his career average is 61.2% true shooting. Like that's the guy you need in the lineup. That's the guy you need next to Cade. That's the guy you need next to Asar and with the Duran there, the two non-shooters in there. Even if you start Ivy, again, the team started last year with Cade, Ivy, Timmy, Tobias, and Duran. So it's like, okay, if Duncan's replacing Timmy, number one, he's a massive upgrade in terms of efficiency. Number two, he's at least like the same level of defender, quote unquote, that Timmy was, right? He's taller. He's gonna eliminate those stupid 2-point shots that Timmy made too as well. And watching all the film on Duncan from last year, remember I went to U of M from 2012 all the way until I mean I graduated in 2023, but I was in Ann Arbor from 2012 until 2021. And I was there in the Critzer Center and all that. So to see Duncan then and now, and even following him with the Heat last year, I'm like, man, he became a really good passer, like hitting guys on the move. There were a couple games. I want to say it was against the Cavs where he was like hitting Khalil Ware on lobs like on the regular. I'm like, man, I didn't ever see that coming. So all that stuff to me, I'm like, yeah, you got to start Duncan just because his skill set and everything he brings to the table. Again, it's replacing Timmy. Like put him in that starting lineup, man. I would like it to be Asar and Duncan on the wing, but if it's Asar and Ivy, that's how they started last year, and Duncan's the upgrade from Timmy.
So I don't think I don't think that's like crazy thinking at all. I do think they will start with Ivy and Duncan will be like Malik Beasley, first guy off the bench, replacing Ivy. Ivy will be the first guy off the floor. So then he can get the point guard minutes when Kate comes off. I think that'll be like same as what they did before. Um, but I also think, and I'll be looking for this, and you brought it up too, that it's like the team was very successful without Ivy. Um, Not to say we don't need him, not to say he's not good, but if the team is just as successful with Ivy on the floor, and then when he's not on the floor, they're just as good with Duncan in that spot, you do have to wonder if, it makes Ivy the player that's more movable to get, whether it's assets or another player or whatever it might be, that just fits better. Um, but I think you have a good argument saying the best lineup we had last year was Asar at the 3 and Hardaway at the 2, and you could play Duncan at the 2, and that actually becomes a very large switchable lineup. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
Cade ends up being the smallest guy in that lineup at like 6'6" too, right? It's like, yeah, it's something to consider. And if they don't run it like major minutes again, it's be one of those things where I'm like, I don't know what you all are doing then. And the Duncan and Ivy lineup right now is a defensive liability. We'll return to Ivy and Duran. We'll save that analysis for next, well, maybe 2 episodes from now, since we'll do the summer league review. Because I mean, that's going to be the big question going in this year is Ivy and Duran with their contracts coming up and all that stuff, and how they haven't signed anything right now. But before we dive into like the roster questions that I came up with, what about the deals that didn't happen? We brought up Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He signed for 4 years, 60 million, 15.1 million per season. Number one, do you think the Pistons could have signed that exact same deal or better?
How much is he getting paid his first year?
Let's take a look at that. So that first year for Nickeil Alexander-Walker is 15.1. Yeah, it's 15.1. It's one of those weird ones. 15.1 the first year, 14.4 the second year, goes back to 15.1 the third year, and then 15.9 player option in that fourth year. Again, I have no idea how these kind of contracts work where they fluctuate up and down. Like somebody else tweeted Keith Smith, somebody like that who's really good at these cap numbers. Normally, it's like the contract either ascends where it goes up every year or descends. These ones that go seesaw up and down, I do not know how they are able to pull these off.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look at it because honestly, I thought he was getting more this first year. So that number is surprising to me.
Yeah, so again, don't think of Duncan's number. We're not going to look at Duncan's number because that was a sign and trade, so that worked differently. Andy and I are assuming that what Caris signed for is what they would have given the Keel or somewhere around there, and it's a 1 million difference between what Caris got, which is 14.1, and what Nikhil got, which was 15.1. I don't know. To me, it seems like something else is at play here, where either Nikhil just wants to go to Atlanta because he loves strip clubs or something like that. Um, you know what I mean? Or he got promised something. But when I look at Atlanta, I'm like, he's the sixth man. They're paying their sixth man 15 minutes. There's no way he's starting. Trae Young's the one, Dyson Daniels the two. They got Jalen Johnson, who they're not going to sit on the sidelines. They just traded for Kristaps Porzingis, and I forget who their fifth guy is. I think they pretty much return all their guys from last year who they Shea, the guy that took number 1 overall in the last freaking draft. There is no way Nikhil is playing over any of those guys. Shea, Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson, or Kristaps Porzingis. No way. So I'm like, I guess that probably played into it where it's like it's 1 million difference. Also, Stu and Duran play a roughly the same amount of minutes. So one of them is technically the sixth man. Maybe him and his representation looked at it and they're mm, like, we really don't think you can get the minute load. And the other part about it that I think maybe is more the determining factor is the fourth year. The other deal that the other deal that supposedly didn't end up happening is the team trading for Malik Monk. Everybody said this, from Zach Lowe to Jake Fisher, Mark Stein, all those guys. They're like, Pistons didn't want that deal because they didn't want the third year of that money. If it were 2 years, they would have taken the deal on because they don't care about that hit, but the third year extra. So maybe it is with Nikhil where they're like, we're we're actually not looking to sign a 4-year deal. So I think those two things are probably what ended up kind of nixing it.
But don't you think Nikhil, at least in my opinion, he profiles as a player we would have wanted for 4 years? Um, unless, and I mean, I, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not buying why we wouldn't want to give him 4 years because you could, I understand like thinking that, we have Ron Holland, but I just don't see why you wouldn't pick him up. And I'm someone who wasn't huge on getting him, but at that price tag, like I thought he was going to get more the first year because I thought that was the big advantage that Atlanta had was the trade exception, which would allow them to go all the way up to I think 24 or something $1 million to get him. So that is surprising to me.
Yeah, you and I were talking like 18, 20 when we thought like that's what he was going to get, and he didn't end up getting that. Yeah, it's an odd deal because it's not like it's a clear like, oh, okay, yeah, he got this bed. It's clear he's going to start there, or like, oh, it's they offered him so much money. It's like, nah, he pretty much was going to be in the same position, making about the same amount of money. And again, maybe it just came down to like he likes Atlanta, or he has a relationship with Quinn Snyder, or something that we don't know about. But it's odd that he ended up not signing. And then again, the Malik Beasley thing, it was right on the precipice of free agency. Maybe the numbers that they gave was based off of that. And then once that happened, it's like, okay, well, actually, we have to pivot and see what else is out there. We can't just sign you now because we also need our volume 3-point shooter. So maybe that's the other part about it too, is like what, and maybe it is what like what I'm saying, what they give Duncan. Maybe they were working out like a sign and trade with Minnesota. Because the other part about it was Jake Fisher at least reported that the Pistons were lining up a lucrative, like a real deal for um Naz Reid.
Hmm.
So it's clear the Pistons were talking to Minnesota, and maybe that's like part of what fell through is like, okay, now we can't actually offer you what we wanted to since we're not getting Beasley, and we have to again find another volume 3-point shooter. That probably looms large over like the Nikhil stuff anyway. But it does suck. Like he was right there. He is a player that seems like he would fit in here. And then the last part about it is Ivy and Duran haven't signed their contract extensions. Asar will be up for a contract extension the season after, and then Ron Holland will be up for a contract extension the season after. I think probably part of it is Trajan being, I don't know if overly cautious is the word, but seeing like, okay, I don't know what these guys are going to sign for. He definitely is like, I don't want to sign these guys to a max deal if I don't have to. Because if that were the case, he would have done it already, right? If he really was that bullish on them, like they would have signed on the dotted line already. So I think that's probably what it is him looking at it. Like if I really had to give one specific thing, it's like, okay, 15 million doesn't seem like a lot, but if you do end up having to pay two guys a max deal, and it doesn't even have to be Ivy and Duran, maybe it's one of them and then Sar is the other one, or maybe it's one of those guys and then Ron Holland's the other one. So that might be the other thing. Like he's looking at long term is like, sure, 15 million right now is not that much, but I don't know what I'm paying these guys yet, or if I really even want to pay them yet. And the other part of that is valuing Nikhil as like, a rotation guy always in your rotation, maybe a fifth starter, not somebody of like, okay, he's a building block.
Yeah, all of that makes sense.
The other deal that supposedly they were looking at, or they almost did, was the sign and trade with Dennis Schroeder. What was the actual sign and trade they went with Dennis Schroeder? It created a trade exception, right?
Correct. So we traded him there. We got nothing back.
Well, we got 14.1, 14.6, something like that in free money. So if
Yeah.
you want to trade somebody, you could,
Yep.
yeah, exactly. You can add that. If you don't know how trade exception works, it's basically like you don't have to trade anything else. You can use that exception based off of the money created by another team signing that free agent for whatever money. And you can just attach that money onto something else. So you don't really have to include anything else. It helps out a ton in adding up salaries or trying to help give somebody else cap relief or whatever. So yeah, I thought that was the best, well, second best course of action with dealing with Sacramento, which is where Schroeder went to. The report was that they were talking about dealing Dennis Schroeder for Malik Monk and whatever else. I told Andy before we started recording, if the Pistons had done that deal where they got Malik Monk back, I would have given this offseason an F minus. Oh, for two reasons. Number one, Malik Monk, Caris LeVert, Jaden Ivey. That's that Spider-Man meme with three Spider-Men pointing at each other. Like they're all the same freaking player, do the same freaking thing. Like you can't play those guys ever together. You're asking one of them to pretty much be like the ninth man at that point too. Like there's not enough room on the roster. Ivy's getting probably like second or third most minutes. Caris or Monk is getting like seventh man, sixth man minutes. Do you really want to shove Ron Holland further down the court to give one of those other ones more minutes? And then there's 3 more years of like 18-ish, 17-ish million. That's not terrible salary, but it's enough to get in the way. So yeah, I'm glad they didn't do that Malik Monk trade. I'm sure that again, the report was that they didn't want the third year, but again, I'm pretty sure like if they liked the player, they would have figured out something to make it work. I think they said what I just said of like, no, we got Ivy and Caris. Like we can't be having a third guy that is that combo guard dude that can play point, that can play shooting guard, that can shoot some, but you need the ball in his hands. Like it would have been a terrible fit in my opinion.
I have no idea why so many people on Twitter were so excited to try and get Monk. It made no sense in terms of the fit. I mean, maybe if we would have gotten Monk and Duncan Robinson and not gotten LeVert, that would have been okay. I think Monk would actually be better than LeVert, but not with that contract. With that contract, I'm much happier with signing LeVert and signing Duncan. I think that makes much more sense. And people who are like, no, you just get the player and we figure it out later. He's an asset. It's like, how are you calling him an asset if Sacramento can't dump him right now? They are trying to move him and Sacramento couldn't move him. So it's like, no, and yeah, it never made any sense. I was so happy when all we got was the trade exception because I think that was the best outcome for us.
I think the best outcome would have been to try and somehow snag Keon Ellis. Again, Keon Ellis, as we laid out before, fantastic 3-point shooter, fantastic defender. He's the better version of what Nickeil Alexander-Walker is. So maybe they can still snag him because Sacramento made a really stupid move. They continue to show how stupid they are. As I laid out in our free agency primer, Keon Ellis, if they just declined his player or his team option, this upcoming season, they would have made him a restricted free agent, and now they can negotiate what they want and don't have to worry about losing him for nothing. But no, they picked up his final year, and now next offseason, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Good news for teams like us, Detroit, but Sacramento, stupid.
Yeah, I don't think they wanted to part with him though, so that's why he's still there.
Oh yeah, great job. Let's just let him dictate instead of it being in our control. Oh yeah, yeah. So questions on this roster for me. Number one, what is Caris doing here? Him and Ivy pretty much play the same role, and Trajan's already made comments of like, yeah, we're gonna play him at point guard, and then a couple days later, of like, yeah, we're gonna let Ivy run point guard again. We still want to do that. It's like, okay, like again, you realize that's the same thing, and we say that Caris seems to be replacing Schroeder, but it's like, okay, Schroeder only existed because Ivy was hurt. So now that Ivy's healthy, like we're still missing Malik Beasley. You know that, right? Like that seemed to be the part that they should have been addressing is like go find another shooter, even if it's somebody that like necessarily hasn't proven themselves. And I mean, Caris LeVert, again, I'm the U of M guy. This goes all the way back into college with a lot of us watching him. There's just like, man, he wastes a lot of shots, dude. His career true shooting percentage is 53.3%. And it's weird. You look at those totals, the shooting splits we gave you 55, 37, 71. Even with the 71, you're like, oh, that's so good. Last season, between the two teams, it was 58.2%. So you're like, okay, Steve, like, shut your mouth. What are you talking about? Well, the season before that in Cleveland, the whole season, 52.4% true shooting. The season before that in Cleveland, 54.6% true shooting. It wasn't until last year that he broke 55.6% true shooting. And he's only posted above 55% true shooting one season before last year. And that was his rookie year. Yeah, again, I understand like the bucket getter, and this is somebody clearly that like is even thinking of the Knicks series of like K's gone. We need somebody to just get a bucket in the second unit. Sure, Caris can do that, but it's like man, he's just never been efficient at it. There was that one brief moment in Brooklyn where he was like a 20-point per game scorer, and people were like, oh, maybe he's going to be a dude in this league, but then just never put it all together. And his 3-point shot has really waxed and waned. I mean, he's 34.5% from three for his entire career. It's like one year he's below average, 32.1%. The next year he's around average, 34.7%. Finally gets up to 36.4%, but then the next three seasons it's all below 35%. Not until his like eighth year in the league or whatever in Cleveland, where he's 39.2%. There's been only two seasons, yeah, two seasons in the NBA for Caris LeVert where he's posted above 34.9% from 3-point range. Again, I get the idea of the bucket getter. And the other question, Andy's going to hate this one. The other question that I asked about Caris is what's the difference between Caris LeVert and Alec Burks? I think there's an actual answer, but remember 12.1 points, 3.2 rebounds, 3.4 assists, 55, 37, 71. That one season that Alec Burks played a full year in Detroit, guess what his averages were there in that one season here in Detroit? It was 12.8 points per game, 3.1 rebounds, 2.2 assists per game, 0.7 steals, 0.2 blocks per game, 45.5% from the 2-point range, 41.4% from 3-point range, 81.4% from the free throwing. Much more efficient. But when I said what's the difference between Caris LeVert and Alec Burks, I have what I think is the definitive answer, but I would ask that to you, Andy. What's the difference?
Outside of Burks being a much better 3-point shooter,
It's a broad question, however you may interpret it.
okay. The main difference, I'm gonna hope that Caris LeVert passes a little bit more. Otherwise, it's I think pretty similar.
Yeah, defensively, Caris is pretty bad. Like he's never been a good defender, so he has that in comparison with Burks. And what was our main beef with Burks? Because again, we looked at the numbers and everything, and we're like, he should be good, but every time we watched him, we're like, get him out of here. What was our main beef with him? Do you remember?
I mean, I don't remember the beef other than like I don't think he made anyone around him better. Like he just did his thing. He drew some fouls. He took some shots, but I don't think he made anyone else better.
Bingo, the ball stuck to him too much. Even though the numbers said like his assists were pretty good, every time we watch him, we're just like, man, him and Boya. I'm like, those are the real big issues with both of them. The ball just stuck to them too much. Whereas with Caris, that's not the case. Yes, I am still very, 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 very concerned about the 3-point shooting numbers, but the ball doesn't stick to him. I feel much more strongly of like letting him run a second unit than Dennis Schroeder. I feel like he at least attempts threes. His 3-point shot doesn't take an hour to get off, and he's taller to at least get in the way and not get taken full agenda. Even if the numbers say he's not that great of a defender, we've seen time and time again in the NBA, even if you're a bad defender, if you're tall, it ends up helping out in the long run just to get in the way. So it's like, I do feel strongly that Caris is going to be a better player than Burks, but I still can't shake that feeling that it seems like it's that kind of thing again. And when I first was putting together the lineup of what I thought the lineup was, I put Burks at like sixth, seventh man. I mean, Burks, I'm messing up again. I put Caris as sixth, seventh man. But then when I ironed it out, I'm like, nah, Duncan's got to play over him. Number one, they're paying Duncan more. So 15.5. I mean, it's like 1 million difference, but still 3 years, 15 million per season, 2 years, 14 million. The money always says who they believe in and who they don't and who they want to play and who they don't. So Duncan edges him out there. The difference between the seventh man and the eighth man is probably 1 million and one more year on their contract, right? So Duncan has to play more. Duncan makes the lineups work more. When I asked the question too of like, is Duncan replacing Timmy or is he replacing Beasley? I'm like, at this point, it doesn't matter. He's replacing one of them, and both of them were much more important than who Caris is supposed to be replacing, and that's Schroeder, right? And Ivy and Caris again. They're going to play them together in the second unit, right? But I don't have great feelings about it. I'm like, man, they seem to just maybe be stepping on each other's toes. We'll see how Ivy's 3-point shot ends up coming along. But if that's the case too, then it's like, are they giving Caris more time with the ball. I just have so many questions about Caris that obviously aren't going to get answered until the season starts. But yeah, I'm just like, what is he doing on this team?
So I think that his role is to help take some of the pressure off of Jaden Ivey in the second unit, because we're not completely sold on Jaden Ivey being the backup point guard. It's something that can work, something that he needs to develop with. But also, I think there's times like when he was paired with Sasser, we didn't like that. And I think that LeVert is a step up from Sasser. He's not the floor spacer that he is, but he's a bigger player. And I just think he takes pressure off of Ivy. And I do understand where you're like, well, I think they're going to step on each other's toes a little bit. And it'll be curious to see what they do there. And also, I'm wondering if they run Asar at all with the second unit to give him some ball handling responsibilities. Um, I think Karis, I think his main job, honestly, is to fit in where JB needs him in terms of the role of, listen, we want you to be a secondary creator, or listen, we just want you to keep the ball moving, shoot it when you're open, even though that's not his best skill set. But I think his catch and shoot threes, I think are he has a much better percentage. Um, but I think that's kind of his role. I think they liked some of the things they saw with Schroeder in terms of ball handling and what he did, but at the same time, I don't think they wanted another point guard. They didn't want Schroeder back, which I'm very happy about. And I think this is kind of a way to like split the middle. Whether or not it works is to be seen. But I do have Duncan Robinson, like you said, ahead of him on the depth chart. I think that Ron Holland doesn't have the handle yet to take a lot of pressure off in the second unit. So I think this is just like a veteran, steady hand playing that role, if that makes sense.
It also reminds me of all these questions. We were saying the same thing about Tobias a year ago, and Tobias still like up and down some stuff, and he still didn't end up being the player we necessarily wanted, but he worked and he adjusted his game to be like a far superior rebounder than he ever was before. He ended up being a really good floor spacer in the playoffs, which is like mainly what he did. And so I don't want to give Trajan and JP the benefit of the doubt because that's such an anomaly too. That kind of change that Tobias did. It doesn't happen very often. It definitely doesn't happen in year 14, which is what happened with Tobias, and it's not going to happen in year what is this 12 or whatever for Caris. Or is his years 9 in year 10 for Caris. So by this point, you normally are what you are, and it's very rare that like they change. But Squinton, you can definitely see Karis being more of a shooter with still supplementary stuff. I'm still it's part of why I really downgrade the off season is just like I don't really know what he's doing here yet, and obviously we're not going to know until he starts. The big question everyone is asking, any Piston fan, is this team better, Andy?
Um, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say this team is better, but I don't think it's going to be better by much in terms of it's it's going to be better, but it's going to be different in terms of I think you're going to see Asar and Ron Holland play bigger their role is still going to be smaller, but they're going to have a bigger impact. Um and I think like Tim Hardaway Jr. filled in a role, and the question is, can Caris do that? I think Duncan Robinson is going to have one of his best 3-point shooting seasons for the Pistons. That is my prediction because damn it, we need him to. I mean, I think playing off of Cade and with his movement,
And though, like, who is he replacing, Timmy or Beasley? It's like it doesn't matter. Either of those roles suit him perfectly.
Yeah, I think he will fill in just great. And I think it's more about the other players. And I think they're kind of using Caris, even though he's not the 3-point shooter that Tim Hardaway is, he's kind of just the veteran that they're hoping they can have out on the floor to help steady the ship when the other guys don't quite have it figured out. But I do think this team will be better. And one of the things that I don't think gets spoken of enough is and it's, they kind of lost it in losing Malik, but in just that continuity of bringing back the same players with the same coach, because we haven't seen that for a long time in Detroit, where the players come back and they're playing the same system they were playing last year with the same coach, and we can see what the growth and the progress is.
Yeah, there's definitely that. I would love to know what the plan was before Malik, and his gambling stuff came out, gambling allegations. I would love to know what it was. If they really did have like Nikhil and Malik lined up, like that would have been an A plus. It's basically like you're running back and you just add one guy that's perfect, like fills in the lineup. Like that would have been great. So I would have loved to known what that is. And I think it would have been an easier time to be like, okay, yeah, for sure that team is better because it's pretty much who was there winning 44 games. Plus you add another guy that can shoot threes and is a way better defender than anybody they had at that spot last year. That would be like, okay, this at least veers into like 45, 50 wins if everybody's healthy and, things go the way that they did last year.
So I have a couple questions for you. Um, do why do you think they didn't want to bring Tim Hardaway Jr. back?
Where did Timmy end up going, Andy?
He went to Denver.
I think
But
that's just what it comes down to. Do you want to play with Jokic, who's on the verge of another title? Or do you want to come back to Detroit where you're probably just, a cheerleader on the bench?
so do you think his role would have been diminished that much?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, how can it not be? Even if they just ran it the roster completely back, why would you ever give Timmy more minutes than Ron Holland and Asar?
Okay. So just with Ivy being back, you feel like Timmy kind of gets pushed out.
Yeah. I mean, it's what we're going to say with Tobias this year. Like, you just can't invest in a guy that old anymore.
Do you think that um Caris LeVert will have a bigger role than Timmy would have had if Timmy had stayed?
That's exactly what I mean. What is Caris doing on this team? I have no idea. I honestly, I don't know. I have no idea. I would say yes, only because they paid him and they obviously didn't want to pay Timmy.
Because this is what's a little bit confusing to me. And not to bring up some of your old ideas on free agency, which this Caris LeVert signing plays right into it. Because we've heard about Caris LeVert to the Pistons for a while. Like, at least have you heard those before?
Yes.
Because like last year we were like, we've heard about Tim Hardaway Jr. to the Pistons and we've heard about Tobias Harris to the Pistons. And the thing that I didn't like is, why was Caris LeVert our very first signing? That's what I didn't like and I didn't get, because out of everything that our team needed, like I would have put him farther down the priority list, but he was the first thing we signed and I wasn't sure why. Do you have any idea like what, because you were just talking about what their plan was before Malik Beasley, but I was like, why is Caris LeVert our first announcement? Like, I'm not like overly upset with it, but why him first? I didn't get it.
So I said this, alluded to this. There is a problem that every Piston GM and president has had since Joe Dumars. It seems like every single one of them, from Stan Van Gundy, Stan Van Bowers, however you want to say that, front office, To stupid at Stefanski. Hey, I'm the guy in charge of this hiring search. Hey, we don't really need a GM. Fuck out of here. To Troy Weaver, everybody that's run this team from Joe Dumars on, they have the same free agency problem of like, we have to sign somebody. Every last single one of them, right? Joe D started it with stupid Charlie Villanueva, sorry, Charlie, and stupid Ben Gordon, sorry, Ben Gordon. Right? Like they just freaking were like, oh, we have to sign somebody. Even Stan Van Gundy, who like we don't really like ream his moves, but like John Lure, like what are we thinking? That's one of the dumbest free agent signings possibly ever. And then even Boban. Boban was great. And then Stan Van Gundy's like, I want to give him $7 million when that was like top backup center money. And then he never played him. It's just like you're an idiot. And then Troy Weaver, same thing. I gotta get Bojan. Like I gotta go get Alec Burks, even though those were like trades and stuff. Like every single GM has been plagued with this Pistons franchise of that. Like, oh, I have to sign somebody because Caris is the one that I'm like, you didn't have to do that. Like you were saying, it's the first one. I think that's the big part of it. And if he's the first signing, it's a clear like you didn't have to do that. And with Duncan coming later on, again, maybe that's because of what happened with Beasley. So they're scrambling, like trying to find something they can work out with. But even if the Duncan thing didn't work out and they're just looking at the rest of the field, I'm like, you don't have to sign anybody, man. You really don't. And I know you got to use up the cap space, but there are other avenues to pursue. There are other free agents out there who fit much better. Maybe you don't like their age. Maybe you don't like their terms. Maybe you're not like fully believing in them, but you do not have to sign somebody, man. And I mean, be clear, it's this feeling like we have this money, we have to use it on somebody. I don't necessarily want to say like they want to do it to make a big splash because I think all of them have viewed it a certain way, but they all have that like panic of like as soon as free agency opens up, we have to sign somebody to show like to the fans.
Yeah, because that was just my reaction when they announced him. I was like, why him? Why is that the first move? Like, if we ended up getting him, I get it, I understand. But to be the very first thing that we do, I just I because like you question his role of what he's going to do. I question the same thing where it's like, okay, if we are having issues with Beasley, I would have even thought like bringing Tim Hardaway Jr. back would have been like more of a priority, even though again, I'm not a huge person in saying bring him back, but we already know how good the team was with him. Like unless you have some plan like how LeVert fills this role, it's just I would have rather gone with the shooter, especially losing Malik, even though we got Duncan. It's I don't know. That's just the question mark for me was like, why is this announcement first? I didn't get it.
Yeah, and to go back to our point on depth too, of like, okay, you had Lindy Waters here, sign him for like 1 year, 5 million. Amir Coffey's out there, sign him for like another 5 million, and then you have what was that, 4 million left there. It's like, go sign somebody else then. Like, why not just build out the depth? It's clear that you believe in everybody, the top six on this team. That's your clear 100%. We're all in on these guys. That's who we want to try and build around. So why in the world do you need to waste 14 million on a guy that's going to end up being the eighth man? Again, I don't understand why every Piston GM has to do this, where they just are like, you know, play. Maybe it's something in the actual Detroit front office and the air that just infects their brain of like, no, 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 you got to use this money right now on somebody who doesn't matter who it is or if they fit.
Yeah, so like you, I'm curious to see how that fit works, and maybe they're just looking at it as it's a relatively easy. Like maybe they're looking at it as we needed someone at that amount who's willing to take that much time to fill this role that's also movable at the trade deadline if we're looking to adjust things. I don't know. I'm just trying to talk myself into something because when that was the first move, I was like, I just don't know. Why is that your first? Is that really the first part of your plan? It didn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah, I echo all those sentiments. Again, that's why I give it a B minus. I'm like, I love the Duncan signing, but again, realistically, he's like the seventh man. I want him to start, but if you just look at like what they've said, how they prioritize people. It's like, okay, this is guy that's seventh in line for sure. Cool to see Duncan out there at Summer League with those guys already. That's probably another indication to me of like, yeah, start this guy. It's clear like he's already building rapport and like tight with some of these dudes already. Um, and then everything after that, it's just like, again, your eighth man, you're paying 14 million for 2 years. I don't get it. I still don't get these 2 year contracts either, because it's this like weird thing of like, we want to pay you and we want you to fill this role, yet we don't believe in you to be long term here. So we're just gonna screw our cap for 1 year in the meantime. Again, no diss on Tobias. We understand Tobias did great. We've all praised him and his professionalism, his veteran presence, but his contract screwed them this free agency period. If they didn't have that extra 26 million on there, I mean, they're in play for like Miles Turner. If they didn't have a 26 million in there, they're pay in play for actually running at Santi Aldama instead of being reported and then realizing like, oh, we don't have the money for it. And guess what? They could just sign Nikhil for whatever they freaking wanted to because they got all that money. So I don't get the 2 year deals. I really don't.
Yeah, I just think he wants the flexibility, knowing that now after one season he's got an expiring contract, and the other thing which we don't talk about enough is they weren't expected to be that good. Nobody expected them to be that good, and that kind of changed, I think, what they were thinking and shopping for and looking for and what they needed when that happened.
It makes me so upset. Ever since you talked about it being the get out of jail free card year, I continue to be very angry with the way that the season play. I know it's like, how can you say that like it was such a fun season, but at the same time, I'm like, man, I really wish they'd have just played around with more stuff. I really wish they'd have hired a coach that was more forward thinking and willing to try out things and whatever. Is it like we said with when Lance was on, the easy part's over. Now the hard part begins. You have to maintain this, and you and I clearly like can't answer yes definitively on is this team better. I think we kind of feel like at the very best outcome is like the wheels are spinning and we're still around mid 40s, which again is not bad, but they've accelerated the timeline to where I put this as the final point for the Pistons stuff anyway. Development time is over. They're on the contract year of Ivy and Duran. That's why I said last year, retire the young guy stuff. That time is past, man. And that's way past now. Like development time is over. If you take a step back, don't pay. Don't pay these guys. It's not worth it. And again, clearly you already know you're good. If you take a step back, you got to eliminate who is not moving you forward. Development time is absolutely 100% over now.
Um, I I don't quite agree with that in terms of like Ron Holland, and I think they know what they have in Asar, even if they don't know how they're going to use him. Um, but I think they still have to get a ton of minutes because I think that helps you answer what you want to do with Ivy and Duran. Um, like right now, Holland's shooting okay from the 3-point line.
That's why I'm saying development time is over, though. Like Holland and Asar to a lesser extent, like don't really apply. The main bulk of your lineup, 2 out of your 5, everybody's still talking about development. Oh, if Duran gets better on offense. How, oh my gosh, the stupid 3-point shooting videos. Are you Piston fans absolutely stupid? How many of you are like 14 years old? Any of you over like 18 years old? You got to be ashamed of yourselves if you're, putting those out there. Pistons Jack, I'm going to cut a little promo on you. This is why you loved Andre Drummond so much. Like, stop sharing these 3-point shooting numbers. Did we not learn our lesson back then? Get out of here.
I I think every center in the NBA shoots threes for practice. It's part of
Yeah,
practice.
I forget who I was listening to, but they're like, man, don't you remember all those Mitchell Robinson videos where he was like legit lays like a point guard? It's like, come on, people, stop doing this.
Oh yeah, that's funny. Did you want to talk about like the Miles Turner contract?
Yes. So I do you have any final Pistons thoughts before we end with my kind of free agency observations and concerns?
Um, I'm I'm good with the Pistons free agency. I think we covered it.
Andy, this free agency period, how many free agents signed for 17.5 million or more per year?
Oh, um, do you can you give me how many free agents there were?
Let's see.
Uh,
I did this a couple days ago on July 12th, and I'm recording this July 14th. As of that date, there were 68 total free agent signings. How many guys out of the 68 signed for 17.5 million or more per year?
I'm gonna say 10.
Three.
Whoa.
How many guys signed for at least 10% of the salary cap? 10% of the salary cap this year is 15.5 million. How many guys this free agency out of the 68 signed for at least 10% of the salary cap?
So I think my first answer was off because I was thinking about guys who got paid, but all they did was they extended their current contracts. Um, but I still would have thought
Now that's gonna be part of my point.
it was still going to be more than three. Was my thought though. But for that percentage, I'll go with 8.
5.
Oh, wow.
The NBA Players Association just voted for Fred VanVleet to be the new president. If this ever gets back to Fred VanVleet, like you got to fix this, man. Andy and I, before we started recording, talked about the Herb Jones contract too. Of like, man, why did he not test the open market? Like, so many people want Herb Jones. Easy to see him getting like 20 to 25 million, right? He signed for significantly less than that. These numbers too in free agency, and I can show you who those guys were. Only Kyrie Irving, Miles Turner, and Fred VanVleet signed for over 17.5 million. There wasn't even another guy that signed for like around 20 million. The next closest guy was Santi Aldama at 17.5 million. And even then, that was like a steal for Santi, where a lot of people thought it was going to start at 20. And then the guys that signed for at least 10% of the salary cap were Duncan Robinson. We got one of them, Santi Aldama, Fred VanVleet, Miles Turner, Kyrie Irving. Nobody else signed for at least 10%. That's probably the more concerning number if I'm like, you know, head of the players union or player representation. Like 10% is not a lot of money. All five of your starters should be signed for at least 10% of the salary cap. That's 17.5 million. That's what like Alan Crabb was signed for way back when in free agency. And that was like 10 or 12 years ago. That's like nothing now. It's really weird. These numbers. This means that only 4% of the entire free agency field got over 17.5 million and only 17 and only, excuse me. So only 4% of this entire free agency class got over 17.5 million and only 7% of this entire free agency class got at least 10% of their team's salary cap. Like, what is happening to this money? And Andy talked about it off air before of like the mid free agents are really getting screwed. I mean, look at this. The gap between Kyrie Irving, Miles Turner, and everyone else is pretty huge. Even the Fred VanVleet, like we look at it as a free agent, but realistically, it's like, you know, a restructuring or like extending his contract because he would have made 44 million just by himself, but he resigned for 2 years at 50. And even if you want to separate it that way, the difference between Fred VanVleet, these three guys, Kyrie, Miles, and Fred VanVleet, and everybody else, nobody else even cracked 20 million. Nobody else even cracked 18 million. That's weird, man, isn't it?
Yeah, and then you look at some of the giant extensions, and I know the in the end, and I've never really studied it. I know other people have, but like with the salary caps, like supposedly the LeBron James type players are underpaid in terms of the money that they bring into their franchise, but when they're getting that much of the salary cap, the teams don't have many options to pay other guys. And if every team has, two max guys, then it's like there's not enough money to pay other guys. The middle, the free agents who are in the middle who are quality good NBA players, they're once they have their good deal, it's hard for them to get another one because there's just not room to keep them.
Yeah. Honestly, if any player, people who represent players ever listen to this, like, look at what happened in the NFL where the owners colluded together after the Deshaun Watson deal. Like, hey, we're not going to give guys, guaranteed contracts anymore. And they shut down Kyler Murray's, renegotiation process to get him less money, less guaranteed. And then it got found out. They got convicted guilty of it. And then they got convicted of covering it up again. I kind of feel like that same thing is happening here. This is tinfoil hat time because it's just like either you're Devin Booker signing 74 million per season extension, or you're like Miles Turner, who asked for 30 million, is what was reported back in like February, and then ends up signing for 27 million somewhere else because your team that just made the finals with you as the second best player was like, nah, we don't want to give you 30 million. Like there's something going on here. It's just bizarre and weird, and especially for a Nikhil Alexander Walker and Bobby Portis. Those are the two that I look at here and I'm like, why aren't they making 20 million? Bobby Portis, when he declined his player option, released a statement of like, I want to be compensated fairly. I don't want to be a team guy anymore. I feel like I've taken, the deal before that helped out the team. And then he signed 3 years, 43 million, which is 14.5. Why is that a big deal? Let's go look at Bobby Portis's last contract. If I can pull it back up here via basketball reference. I might not be able to. I might have to go do it via Spotrac, but we can do it either way. So yeah, they eliminate the contracts from last year. Let's go check out Bobby Portis and see what his previous contract was. Where you at? So yeah, his previous contract, getting messed up here. Yeah, he was earning 12.144. He signed 4 years, 48 million. Well, you're telling me being fairly compensated for a guy that's been on a title team, been consistently their sixth man, been probably like their third or fourth best player every year. His fair compensation after doing all that is just getting 2 more million per year. And he didn't even test the open market too. That's the other weird part about it, and where I feel like the collusion talk should like be brought up, or at least something about what's going on with how teams are dealing with players now. It just seems like there are more and more guys who are afraid to test that open market. Like Bobby Portis, again, somebody who should, you would think if he declined his player option, there would be teams lining up to try and get a stretch big. The Pistons being one of them, right? That was one of the reports in the offseason was like, they need a stretch big. And then Herb Jones, again, Herb Jones not even trying, whereas he's somebody that's always talked about both internally in NBA circles from reports we get and amongst fans of like, oh man, we need that guy. It's like, you don't think there's a bidding war for your services? So it just seems like more and more players are quote unquote playing it safe, unless you're, Devin Booker, Kyrie Irving, who you're going to get paid. If you're not a marquee star, it just seems like everybody seems to not want to get out there and test what's going out there. And the Miles Turner thing, like he might be actually an example, right? Where he wanted 30 million. The Pacers kept saying, no, we're not going to give that to you. And then he ends up getting 27. Again, tinfoil hat, whatever you can say. I'm, reaching too far into this, but it just seems like that's more and more of a thing coming to pass is like you either get paid as a superstar or you will get less than what you want, like way less, significantly less.
Yeah, and like what about there's still some, restricted free agents out there like Kaminga and Grimes and Giddy, and it's like those guys are stuck.
Yeah, for sure. It's really the Kaminga one. It does kind of suck too because it's like the guys here that are stuck. Like you can understand why they're stuck, but I feel like 5 years ago they would have been signed already, right? And last season we said it with Isaac Okoro too. Remember, it was like I think we were doing the summer league review, and we're like, is he even signed yet?
Yeah, and that's where like looking at, Ivy and Duran, it'll be interesting to see how their contracts get worked out.
Yeah, it just seems like for all the talk of player empowerment or whatever, they don't have the leverage in these negotiations anymore, especially with these restricted free agents. All these guys, Cam Thomas, Quentin Grimes, Kuminga, Giddy, they're all 25 or younger, and nobody wanted to sign him to an offer sheet. Grimes is probably the most bizarre out of the bunch because it's like what Nikhil got paid. He should easily be making that at the very least. I know probably part of it is his representation, seeing how he looked like a lead guy in Philly. They're probably asking for like max money or whatever. But your job as an agent is to get the guy paid, not to wait it out this long, right? You would think there would have been an offer that they could go drum up. And it's not like they're going to some other team asking them for a max offer. If that is what's happening, then please, Quentin Grimes, fire your agent because that market just didn't exist. The minute you heard that, you know, that who got signed, like Santi got 17 and a half, you got to go to your agent and be like, okay, we got to get money, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's and and part of it is just the whole process with restricted free agency where teams don't want to put out that offer because of how hard it is on all their other free agency stuff. So, I mean, it rarely happens, and when it does, it's like memorable because it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, teams seem to just like stop doing that anymore too. Like Brooklyn seemed to be lined up pretty easily to do that for Santi or somebody like that, but then they opted not to do it. So that's the other part of it. Maybe restricted free agency, and a lot of people have argued this for many years. Like restricted free agency is pretty much dead anymore because nobody's willing to go do the Indiana Pacers, who I think that's the last one I can really remember being significant, who they threw the max offer at DeAndre Ayton and then forced Phoenix's hand to like, okay, we have to do this even though we don't want to do it. Yeah, it's just bizarre. Pay attention to these things. The main thing for me too is like they keep talking about the TV contracts or the streaming contracts. It's going to give more money to everybody. There's going to be another spike, and it's like nah, it doesn't look like that. From again looking at this field, nobody's willing to spend now. So pay attention to the money, man. Andy, do you have anything else to say before we get out of here?
Good to do this again. It had been a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely return for Summer League review. And the one I'm queuing up next is looking at Ivy and Duran. Again, development time is over, man. It's now or never.
Do you think we'll be talking about a Detroit Pistons Summer League championship?
No, unfortunately not.
Oh, way to be a Debbie Downer.
Hey, I can only keep it real as I get me in trouble anyway. But
And you
it
don't
is
think
what it.
Dennis Jenkins will be the Summer League MVP?
I think he'll like still continue to produce. I do kind of fear that Ron's going to get pulled because he has shown clearly that he's like summer league is over for him. You know what I mean?
Keep playing, Ron. Just keep playing him. Play him in every game. Get your Summer League ring.
And that's just the thing. Every year that happens when a GM sees like, oh, this guy is like blowing everybody out. They immediately pull him.
Yep. All right, man. This was fun.
Sorry to burst your bubble here to end the podcast, Andy. But yeah, definitely the summer league has been fun. And please, Dennis Jenkins, we want definitely he's earned the spot, man. He's earned the call up in the full contract. So yeah, thank you so much for everybody listening. We'll catch you next time. We're going